Welcome to another episode of the Spiritual Wealth Podcast. Today, my guest is 𝗕𝗂𝗍𝗍, and 𝗕𝗂 is someone that I met this summer at a music festival. And pretty much immediately upon meeting 𝗕𝗂, it was directly into philosophy, and that just went on and on and on. And now that I've started to get to know 𝗕𝗂 a lot better, he is just a philosopher and amongst many other things at the root and at the core. So I love chatting with him. And both on and off camera, it was just one philosophical concept after the next and just investigating and checking things out. And what really fascinated me about 𝗕𝗂 was his journey from, I guess, through religion and eventually the decision to leave Christianity after a life, like a whole childhood of being on the Christian path, and how he arrived at that decision and how his spiritual journey has progressed and developed over the years. And it's really fascinating. So in this podcast, we get to explore that and jive on a few other different things. So I really hope you enjoy the podcast. Hello, 𝗕𝗂.
Hello.
Welcome to the Spiritual Wealth Podcast. Today, my guest, 𝗕𝗂𝗍𝗍, and I met you at a music festival this summer, and we met on the dance. Oh, you were camping with us, but yeah, we had some good. We knew you kind of integrated really well into our group.
Yeah, it was nice to be invited, and it was a very random occurrence, very last minute. So
yeah,
it was like a real gift to end up there.
Had you been to? It was Bass Coast Music Festival. Had you been there before?
Yeah, I was a frequent attender, but COVID and everything hadn't had it going, and I was just trying to find someone to go with me last day, sending messages to different people, being like, "Yo, Bass Coast this year, like I think we should go," and everyone was like, "Oh, it's like in 2 days," and I sent a message to Dana, and she's like, "Oh, we've got a whole posse, like I'll set you up a tent," and I was like. And then it was all you guys, so it was great to... That
was a good time. That was one of my highlights for the summer.
Yeah, it was good, for sure.
But yeah, so we got to jam and just kind of get to know each other on a basic level at the event. And then you came by here, a month and a half ago, and we started getting into more philosophical debate and chats. And you told me a bit about your background, and then I was like, I want to have him on the podcast to talk, because I think your perspectives are really unique, and
thank you.
And you're well spoken, in my experience.
Thank you.
So, but what you said that really got me going was just, I think we started getting into like the background of Christianity, and my family comes from a Christian background as well. My grandfather specifically, who was very much like reading the Bible all the way until he died at 102 years old, and just that whole Christian approach. And in my older life now, I've really started to attune myself to like those kinds of questions. What is God and stuff? And it's developed a lot and changed a lot. But when you mentioned that your whole family background and your path is Christian as well, and that you actually said that you left the church after some rigorous, you really had to think through it.
Yeah, for sure. I was afraid, I had been raised from, since I was born, that sinners, people who didn't believe in, who didn't accept Jesus as being their one true savior, they would be going to hell. And it was a real place, and that it was scary. And I never really contemplated wanting to go there, so it never seemed like it was just facts. It was facts right from the get-go.
Yeah, and it's that severity of leaving, which I think when you first mentioned it, when we were chatting, you came by the house and we got into that chat, and I was like, wow, I want to hear more about that decision, and then how your relationship to creation has evolved and where it is today. But yeah, you know, kind of starting from your early life, your whole family was from the Christian approach. And you mentioned you even were interested in becoming a pastor at one point.
For sure.
And so really the investigation of what that path is, leading all the way up to leaving. And so maybe you could just, I don't know where to start here.
Sure, yeah. Maybe I'll just like kind of give a brief overview kind of, you know, my relation to Christianity throughout the years and how it was integrated into my family and why. But, you know, right from an early age, it was Sunday school, and every single week you're in a community that's believing kind of a central dogma, a theme of all these things.
How would you describe a dogma, just to like give context?
Like a set of beliefs that are cohesive in a means that have an outcome.
Right.
So it's like the belief structure in which a means in which you ought to live your life, and being outside of that dogma means that you are not living the Christian way.
Right. This is what we're going for. Right.
Which is, it's quite a fragmented religion in the way that there's a lot of different churches that have slight different beliefs in things where certain parts of the Bible they will take a lot more seriously, and some take them more figuratively. And ours, we moved around through some of these different sects, as they are, denominations is what they're referred to.
What was kind of the most important theme with the way you guys were raised?
Well, ours, I shifted through a whole bunch. There was a group called the Pentecostals, and they are very, they believe in things like speaking of tongues, which is that God will start speaking through a person in the church, and they start speaking what appears to be gibberish. But anytime that someone starts speaking in tongues, he'll also provide an interpreter. And there's another person that just jumps up and is like, and now God's saying this, and so it's like almost like a direct connection to God is this kind of perception.
Right.
Very enthusiastic in worship. The Pentecostals, waving your hands during worship time and really, feeling it and really getting into it. And then others that are a lot more muted and
kind of sounds fun.
For sure. And it's actually, if I spent some time in the Pentecostal church, and it was great for just getting into it. And worship was actually the thing that actually kind of called me to it, and experiencing the feeling that came from what I perceived as being God, that worshiping him in this way. And it's being in the same way where being at a dance festival, I feel in a similar way. You're with a whole bunch of people that are connecting into a space together to really celebrate something that's really important to them. Connection, love. And in this case, it's awe. You're really praising God for everything that he has given, and how much love he must have given you for sending his only son to die for you. And when you really when that's really something that you're continually being, it's being fed to you every single week. It's sometimes
really the central theme.
It's very material. It's very material. And when it really strikes you sometimes, those music progressions, like the goosebumps that you get when you listen to songs that you really love, it strikes you in a way where it's just it fills you, and you're just oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
And that was God speaking through. That was God. I felt God in those moments.
Right.
That's how I perceived it. And I loved that feeling. And I wanted, when I had times of trouble, I could bring those things to that place, and I could exercise them out of me sort of by getting into the moment. Yeah. By being able to release those problems to God, that they weren't really that important. It was actually about letting go, and then God would take care of the things for me.
Right.
And then I was given peace. So that feeling for me was something that really,
and this is all part of the Pentecostal church.
This was happening in different churches. This is universal, that worship is a pretty normal thing. In modern day, worship is, they're like rock shows. They bring in modern instruments. It's not an organ in a church. In the Protestant.
I've gone to church. I go with my family to church at Christmas.
Yeah.
And it's pretty rock star. It's pretty
good.
It's actually pretty fun.
Yeah, totally. Lots of family has been in those worship groups, that's what they call them. And so, and that was, 14, 15, I started to be this is a big thing. This helps people. This helps get people to let go of the things that are hurting them. They're suffering.
The faith as a whole
faith
is helpful. It's useful.
Yeah, and that feeling of being able to release to God, and God kind of giving you peace.
Right.
That aspect of giving that relief, the feeling of peace is really what was really attracting me to continue kind of down that path. But as time went on, and the teachings started to I started to really look at the teachings in a different way. When you start thinking about how you might want to be telling other people about this stuff and teaching them about, you have to be able to sell the product,
you have to be able to articulate the product. In this
and
case.
you have to know like what it is. And there was a bunch of questions that I started to have, and I didn't really, they were like peripheral things where like I'd thought about some of the things, but I hadn't really contemplated them as like, wait, if that's like real, like if that's like something that is important that I need to like understand, then
you need to tell others.
I need to tell others, and I don't really quite believe that. It wasn't important because I had already experienced this thing and I know it's true, but someone I'm sure has an explanation as to what it is, and I'm just not interpreting it correctly or whatever. Right. And so, I started to get into a bunch of these like really this essence of who is God, what is the character of God, and started to really explore a lot of the Old Testament, particularly where
you summarized it earlier, the Old Testament versus the New Testament.
Yeah.
The Old Testament is just everything before Jesus.
Everything before Jesus is the Old Testament. Yeah. And from the stories of creation, and then the history of like how humanity kind of progressed from there into, like a lot of people look at it like a historical record of Christianity. It's in some ways a history book, but also has some really beautiful books in it as well. Like Psalms is a poetry, and Proverbs is got tons of like great wisdom. Like there is really nice aspects of the Old Testament for sure, that I still love and appreciate. But there's also some really absurd things in there that actually paint God in a very strange light that was not congruent to the way that I was experiencing God, the ways that I was like feeling his love and that release that.
Yeah, and this is specifically to the Old Testament that you're talking about?
Yeah, there's very little in the New Testament that I ever really had any problems with. It was mostly Jesus walking around and being really awesome and like loving everyone and like really throwing like, people being like, things in the Old Testament was like stoning people to death because they were bad, like a prostitute. You stone a prostitute to death. That's just like one of the things that you would do. And, Jesus totally overthrew a lot of these ideas. He would like get in the way, and he's like, if anyone wants to cast a stone,
let it be at me.
At me, or show me one of you guys who hasn't sinned. Why are you doing it to her? Like, look at yourself first,
Right.
Focus on yourself. Make yourself better. Don't look around at everyone else and judge everyone else. Like, it's like his whole message was like, love others. One of the things that we were talking about, like the whole thing can be really summarized by love God, love your neighbor, and love yourself.
In the New Testament.
In the New Testament. That is
in the Old Testament. You painted a pretty grim picture of God.
It was terrible. Yeah, it was like, well, I mean, you look at the story of creation by itself. Yeah. Here's a God that we anticipate, or we're taught he's all-knowing. He knows everything that's ever going to happen. He's like, he created everything. He knows the end of times. And yet, so he creates man in his image. And then, Adam's lonely, and so he makes a woman for him. He creates female animals for everything else except for man. But then man was lonely because the rest of the animals weren't enough for him. So he makes the woman. And he's like, but whatever you do, you can live in this paradise, but don't eat this one fruit. Just don't eat it. That's all I'm going to say. Well, what else? Like, what are you... He knows exactly that this is going to happen. And then as soon as they end up...
Like, he devised the plan.
Yeah, And then Satan comes in and he's like, yo, you guys should eat the thing. And, he convinces Eve first because Eve was, she's... And,
I've heard people refer to the thing, the apple, is actually Eve.
Yeah, very... Like, it could be, yeah.
Don't eat the apple.
Yeah.
And then Adam's just like,
but she looks delicious.
And Eve's just like, eat it.
Yeah. And he's like, get out of here. Paradise is over for you. Right? But like, this is the thing where like, so God knows that this is all going to happen. And then he like punishes them for like actually creating the whole thing. He creates the drama. So that's going to happen.
He's creating the drama.
So that and then he punishes them for it. But like Adam and Eve don't know that.
Right.
They would be completely oblivious to that. It would be something where they were just like, I am a horrible person. It was the only thing that I wasn't supposed to do.
Right.
That's actually gaslighting, if you think about it.
Right.
So we start off the whole Bible with God gaslighting humans. And then it goes into this other, whole other thing.
That story is told in the Old Testament, the start of the Old Testament.
Yeah, that's the first chapter of the Bible. Yeah,
everything. Okay.
Genesis. And then there's all these other stories of God telling the holiest man on the planet to sacrifice his own son, which is like, why would you force somebody to like kill their own son? And it ended up being a test, and he ended up providing a goat, and it was this whole thing so that he didn't have to actually murder his own son. But
he's like provoking it.
Yeah, he definitely was like, you have to do this. Are you gonna do it? And just like, watch. Are you gonna kill your son for me? Huh? Do you love me that much? It's like this thing of like, right. You need to prove love. He's like jealous. He's if there's like anybody worshiping another god, he like destroys them with fireballs. You really seem to be keen with fireballs.
So contemplating all this is when you started to like, because you need to start promoting.
Yeah, and so
is this because you're thinking of the path of being
totally.
a pastor?
How do I teach this to people?
Like you're gonna have to teach.
Yeah,
it.
so I'm like, so what's up with this? And I start asking my religious leaders first, in my youth group, asking them like, what's the deal with this? This doesn't seem like a loving God to me. Right. The idea of like having hell as a place where he can abolish it if he wants. Nobody has to go to hell.
That's probably like the biggest thing that most people like, what if it's an all-loving God? What's the deal with hell then? That's what I think deters a lot of people. But
they believe that Satan is the one that brings you to hell. So it's like you choose to go there because you don't want to follow God. You let all of your desires, which is Satan stoking the flames of your desires, all the things you're not supposed to do, and you don't listen to God to not do all of your largely natural human desires.
Even in Buddhism, they say don't follow your desires.
Right. But you don't go to a place of like a fiery burning place that the man controls the place. You can't be a loving.
It's not painted that way.
Yeah.
It'd be more like you'll get reincarnated and you have to deal with everything because you're still attached to all these desires.
Right.
Yeah.
But for like,
so
but you still there's redemption even in that thing. There's still a path out of it. Like you'll have to deal with the consequences. But hell is like forever, and you just like
in Christianity,
right? And there's no like faith is the whole thing is built on faith, right? So you have faith, which is something that you have to just like at some point be like, yeah, things might seem a little bit whack, but I'm just going to believe it anyway, and I have no doubts. And if you don't have faith, then you're not in the club,
Right, which means you're out. You're going to
You're out, So you can...
If you're out, you're going to hell, though?
Yeah, totally. And specifically, there's the magic words that is this thing that, you invite Jesus into your heart, and you can be like, God, I'm a sinner. Please, Jesus, come into my heart and be with me. And then you're a Christian, and you're like now on your path to being in heaven with God at the end of your days. But there's nothing else that you have to do necessarily aside from just believe that Jesus was real, acknowledge that you're a sinner, and ask forgiveness.
It's fairly simple.
It's fairly simple, and then you just go about your life and try and live like God, because you just should, and you should spread that message because you're going to help people to not
go to hell and go to heaven.
To go to
awesome.
Heaven, yeah.
So, in your process, tell me more about the process then of leaving the church. So you said you were around 15 at this time?
When you're starting to ask around questions? 15 is when I was like, maybe I should be a pastor. I was like,
because your family's encouraging you.
I wouldn't say that they were encouraging me, but it was something that like I did have some interest in. But like the church community in general, there's like, if you move towards something that everyone would, there's like a pride almost to it, and if you say it, it's like, oh, great. Sort of like, oh, right. That's great. Yeah, you'll do great. I can see God working through you already. It's like, there's like a real encouragement that makes you feel special that you're you're choosing this life. But as I started to like think about it and really study maybe a little bit more, even it was then I kind of committed to like, I need to read through the whole Bible and, like start to finish and just like, understand it. And these things started to come up. And so then I started to talk to religious leaders of like, yeah, no, I'm totally about God, love God. But why would he do, like, that seems contradictory to this other place where he's the loving father, but in this other place he's like punishing his children who really are pretty stupid overall compared to God, and have no real means to for sure understand any of this stuff is happening, having to do it all on faith. And if they're wrong, they go to hell forever. That seems like really not very loving. It seems like confusing for and
what kind of feedback did you get?
You just need to have faith. It
so
was
you're getting too involved now.
You're
just
really
like,
you're overthinking it,
faith.
like, you know, like just it's just God, and this is God works in mysterious ways. We can't explain God. God is beyond our understanding, and this is the word that he gave us, and we need to believe this word. I was like, cool, but also like, I don't know, that doesn't make sense. Like, frankly, that's not the God that I think I love. Like, and if that's what I'm supposed to be believing, then I don't know if I do believe that. I don't know if I believe that a God who loves humans because they're his children would firebomb a city because they're homosexuals. I don't know if I believe that.
And he created the story.
He created the entire story. He knows how the whole thing's going to play out. You know, people would have been born into this city. It would have been their way of life. There would have been this would have been something that was common around them. There would have been no shame in any of that, you know? So it's really hard for at what point would they have known that it was even wrong to be doing? Was God you know, and that's not really discussed. It's just like they were doing something that he didn't like, and they were like an abomination to God. And so he firebombed the place.
Right.
Know? And so I kept trying to seek that out. Like, and you know, I started to actually get rather blasphemous about it, being like, if that's the God, you know, I don't fucking like that guy. I think he's a real fucking asshole, you know? Like, that's
the opposite of
the total opposite. I was like, that guy's like whack. That's whack. Are you kidding me? Like, I just don't believe that. In fact, it came to a place where like everything in my brain was like, this cannot be true. This cannot be true.
How old are you at this point?
17.
So now you've done a couple of years of questioning.
Yeah, and it started to escalate. Like,
had you spoken to your parents at all?
Oh yeah, totally.
Okay.
And I mean, I was getting kicked out of Bible studies because the other kids were like, yeah, that's a good question, and they're like, you're changing kids' minds. Like,
right.
These are like moldable minds, and we're trying to teach them the essence of what this is, and like help them to have faith. And
you got kicked out?
Yeah, I was asked to not be going to it.
Huh.
And then but I started talking to like higher pastors, like going straight to like the pastor of the church, and then it was there was a district pastor that they thought that I should talk to. He had a PhD in philosophy, and I was really getting into philosophy at that time, Nietzsche particularly, and some of the concepts that he was bringing forth were like, you know, if all of these things are perceived to be correct, this loving God, this thing, then he's whack, you know. And I was like very much vibing with that. I was like, yeah,
Nietzsche.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is, you know, Nietzsche's like nihilism, and so it's like things are starting to get real dark for me in a lot of ways, because not only am I losing like my faith in all of this stuff, but I'm losing like a lot of friends, like not going to
and identity stuff at that age.
Totally. This is like, I had 2 regular places that I was going in the evenings. There was like a youth group type thing and a Bible study at church. It was becoming a little bit awkward because now these pockets of friends were hanging out with each other, and I was more of an outsider. And within my family too, it was like just things started to be like I was a bad kid, you know. I was starting to be like just dissident and not working with I'm just not vibing anymore. I'm not vibing with
you don't have faith.
I don't have faith. I lost it. I'm not in the club anymore, and that was really hard. It was really hard to like feel both ostracized from a community, and not like, it's not something that's like Scientology or something where they come after you and make sure that, you know, like it's a very like they're just like, oh, come back, like please come, like we'd love to have you back, you know, sort of thing. But you have to
It's
believe.
more just like, get him out.
It was more like, come and hang out, yeah, but just like you can't say anything about
what
you're
say.
feeling. Yeah. It's like you're just not really invited to talk about the thing that's like everyone's rallying around.
It's very much just not open contemplation. This is hear the teachings and absorb them as quickly as you can.
It's there's no freedom of speech in it, so to say. Like if it was like a government system, they'd be, I'd be the guy that was getting shot. Sort of. It was like get those bad ideas out of here.
I was in the school for that as well when I was like 13, 14 years old. I think I was doing that for about 2 years only though. But I wasn't interested in the same way. It was just like where I had to go.
Yeah, totally.
I didn't really have any beliefs of any kind at that point. It was just it was nice.
Yeah, it was just community. It's a
community.
Go and hang out with, eat some cookies.
But I wasn't asking questions at that point. I was like skateboarder and just that's what I thought about.
Right.
So
and then there was me coming around and people were just like, yeah, that actually, you were
you're
strong in your idea.
Inquiring.
And as soon as I started talking about some of the things that they were teaching in that moment, being like, but why would he do that? That seems odd, doesn't it, to you? And it,
like almost looking for some validation. It's like, don't you think that's odd? And and it's not coming back. Like,
but a lot of it was just like, can you explain it? Like, maybe I'm just missing something in this whole equation. Yeah. So it was it was really tough. And I was also, from the time I was born, thought that there was a hell. And there's a place in the Bible where they talk about if you reject the Holy Spirit and you say, I don't believe in this, you're done. It's like one of the only sins that you can't recover from. It's like denying the Holy Spirit, saying he's not a thing. And I was there. I was at a place where I'm just like, even if I'm not saying the words, I'm like, definitely that's where I feel. I'm just like, I'm denying this. This is not right. And I felt lied to. I felt lied to because this thing had no real evidence to really back up any of this stuff. There was like no one ever had really seemed to ever ask these questions. No one had any explanations for any of this stuff. The philosophy professor that I ended up talking to, he brought up, I think it was Kierkegaard, and I forget which. He was a mathematician as well, but the whole idea was you've got really only a couple of outcomes. God exists or God doesn't exist. And if God exists and you're right, you have all of eternity for
in heaven.
Yeah. If he does exist and you say he's wrong and he doesn't exist, then you have everything to lose. You have hell to go to. Or you can not believe that it exists and it's right and nothing happens.
Or something totally different is going to happen.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Or you do believe that it's wrong and nothing is actually there, and so nothing happens. So it's like either nothing happens if you don't believe in you're right, or you have everything to lose for being wrong.
That's how the scenario is.
So by probability alone, just by like if you look at the math, you've got either nothing, horribleness, or you believe and you could get everything. And that was his explanation why I should believe. And I was just like, but that makes... So you're telling me that God has made me gamble my eternal salvation on these odds of just like, I should believe because, if I look at the math looks like... And I was just like, okay, I'm out of here. You know what? I deny the Holy Spirit. Fuck this. And that was it. And then I moved into a different path.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. Oh, man. Okay, so you're at the place now where... you're finally going to shut the door on, you're going to do this thing and deny it and deal with the consequences socially in your family life and in your communities. Yeah, and then,
I mean, it was trickling in like kind of the whole time. I was continually kind of being like ostracized, so to say, just, distance from everything that, and I was kind of accepting it. This is more like the official,
I'm going to shut the door.
Yeah,
now.
This was like, okay, like not getting my kids baptized or whatever, which was...
How old are you now?
19. 19 was when I was like done. Okay. I'd gotten married in that time frame and ended up having kids and stuff, which is a whole different, or my first kid. And that was also like part of my whole thought process of like, what am I going to be teaching to my child in all of this? And there was going to be a lot of pressure as to how one raises a child, and and I didn't want it to be in that path. So
with you, when you closed the door on this chapter, I mean, in my experience, when one door closes, then a whole new line of freedom and openness to questions and possibilities opens. So what are kind of the first questions now that you've closed the door?
I was quite depressed initially.
No questions. I just need to be upset for a while.
Yeah, totally. I just was like, everything's meaningless, actually, was my kind
It's
of...
like nihilism?
Total nihilism, just, this is all... Like, I remember thinking, like, Hitler doesn't matter. Like, that was just, it's just like a nothing thing.
Yeah.
He mattered to us, but, we're just all going to be dead eventually. And then this, like, blip of this thing that happened on Earth was just like it just happened and it was gone. And it was just a flicker of something that meant nothing at the end of it all. And so then what can I do with my life? What's the point of anything? And just really into this place of sorrow, that it just didn't mean anything. Something that actually I thought maybe had a lot of meaning, that God created us for something, a purpose. It was so in my core that there was a purpose for what was happening. And then it's gone. There's no purpose. And it took me a while until it started to feel, well, wait a sec. If I don't have any certain obligation that I need to do, then maybe there's something, at least there's interesting things that are happening. And then I started to like look at it as, I guess, moving through nihilism into like absurdism.
Absurdism?
Absurdism.
I've actually never heard of that.
So Albert Camus was one of the leading founders. It's like this idea of not. So one of the examples that he used was who's that god that or that person who was forced to push a rock up the mountain?
I
forget his name, but.
I don't remember either. I know the story.
Prometheus or something. I forget.
Anyway,
he wanted to live forever, and so he was punished by having to push this rock up the mountain every single day. And that was his, like, sure, you can live forever, and then it's like just suffering, basically. This work that you have to do. And the whole idea is that he looked at, like, everybody looks at this as like, oh, that must be so hard every day, meaningless, pushing up the thing, same thing every day. He's like, but why do we? Maybe he loved it. Maybe he loved going up, and there was rabbits along the way, and he was like, "Oh, hey, rabbit!"
Bodybuilders, they just go lift the weight.
Yeah,
every
exactly.
day.
And it's just because we attribute that's a meaningless thing to do, doesn't mean that he didn't find meaning in it.
I mean, I'm a rock climber.
Right.
I just rock climb up the rock,
you
and
move up
down.
the mountain exactly, and so his whole concept was like, we actually place it on him, and the whole thing is actually crazy, and you can find enjoyment along the path, even if you're lifting a heavy rock all the way up this thing.
So we make the meaning.
Right. And it turned into something of, maybe it's nothing. Maybe the whole thing is nothing. Maybe there's no meaning behind it, but it doesn't mean that you can't enjoy, like, but isn't this crazy? Isn't this absolutely wild? That, like, we are perceiving, trying to understand, place it, we have enjoyment, we laugh, we feel sad about things, and it all may be meaningless, but it means something to us in the moment. And we are constantly going through this state of things having meaning to us, and we can.
How long did you roll around in nihilism before you actually even start?
That's probably like 2 years or something like that.
So now you're like 21-ish, 22.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And then I was just kind of floating. Spirituality wasn't really something that I was focusing on much at that
just
point.
Like
I was really kind of enmeshed in science, and just like, I don't know, we don't know what it is. I'm okay with that, and this is weird, and I like it, and let's just play it out and see what's happening. And
this is weird, meaning like us just being alive. This is weird.
This is weird. I don't need an explanation. I accept that. Okay. There was I didn't need to try and attribute it to. Know. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's a good place, actually.
Yeah. It didn't feel like necessitated an answer to something that we just, I don't know, it's weird and we don't understand, and science is trying to figure out some parts of how things seem to be working, and some of those things are really interesting when you start to get into quantum mechanics. And I was really interested into like where theoretical physics was going, and just the cosmos in general, and black holes and all these things that we have really no idea of, dark matter. But it was all just, I was just like, yeah, it's crazy. It's all so crazy. We're still barely scratching the surface on the cosmos. That's how that's all going. Understanding time, and we've like no means to explore whether there's other life forms. Really,
I feel like that's kind of where I've been for like since the start. It's just like I'm still pretty much there right now. That's why I started this podcast. It's like, this is insane.
It's so insane. This is so
insane. And nobody seems to know anything.
Yeah, but people actually are just like walking around like, no, this is normal. Yeah, I'm gonna get coffee in the morning and I do my thing, and I'm just gonna go to work and I'm gonna do something that I have like just so do the thing so I can like do something at night which seems quasi enjoyable. There's no like. It's often like lost. We really take for granted this like absolutely absurd thing that we are experiencing that has very little explanation.
Yeah, it's sometimes I laugh about like just in a very general sense, just God, how nothing has been like, how does he keep it so secret? It's all like so mysterious,
right?
Like I can't keep a secret for like
yeah,
I can keep secrets, but still it's like in eternity and nobody still knows.
Yeah, well, but we're trying to figure it out, and like when we look at religion overall and all of the different religions, we all have different ideas, and those ideas end up having some meaning to us, and they add value in a way of us helping us cope with suffering.
And they create perspectives and paradigms, which
absolutely,
and you can explore each of them, and that's fun and
they're interesting. They're interesting because we still are trying to put it into a box somehow to try and find some sort of understanding as to what it is, to help us navigate in a way that makes it more fulfilling for our lives. Really,
I mean, a lot of. In religions, I think they try and put it into a box, in very just basic, simple other practices, you don't try and put it into a box. You try and just evade the whole, because the box is in the mind in a lot of cases. It's the thought structures, right? There's a whole story and there's a structure and there's like there's the principles. Like in Buddhism or even Taoism, you move away from thought altogether, in which case there is no paradigm. You're just peaceful, basically.
Yeah.
Right? You just meditate and you be at peace with what you are, which is, it's not even worth defining.
For sure.
The Tao is undefinable, and even in the Bible, God is undefinable. So there's no point of trying to box it into a bundle of thoughts.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think like what started to bring me back to the idea that there was an essence that I didn't understand, because I would say that I was an atheist. Like I became like very. You
started to identify as an atheist.
I was an atheist. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Okay.
I personified an atheist.
Yeah.
And I was actually like, where I would have been a pastor, I was actually going around and trying to convince Christians that they should also be atheists. I was like, that you're actually following something that's a lie. That's something that's not right.
Oh, you're like an active atheist.
Yeah.
Like you're trying to like convince
people. I was trying, because I saw a lot of damage that was being done in society as a result of Christianity. So I was actually quite combative against Christianity for a period of time, to try and convince others to contemplate some of these things that are incongruent. They are a lot of things that are causing massive problems in our society.
Right.
The belief, for example, that Jesus is coming back within their lifetimes. And why does the environment matter if the end of the world is about to come and God's going to reconcile everything and bring all the believers up to heaven and destroy the earth? There's no reason to have any sort of environmental policies or foreign policies on trying to reduce nuclear armament or whatever.
Why do all that?
Why contemplate any of it? Why think about it? Why vote for the right people? None of it really, it starts to not really matter.
Because we're about to get saved.
Because we're going to get saved. And it's something crazy like 40% of Americans believe that Jesus is coming back within their lifetime. It's really difficult to like...
Right now.
That's a current statistic. How do you govern properly? How are they voting appropriately for what's actually going on in the world? And I saw that as kind of a significant problem. Coming from a different viewpoint all of a sudden and going, this is crazy, and kind of, frankly, this is amazing.
What's your state at this time? So when you're actively engaged in that, how are you doing personally, like as emotionally and everything?
Are you
kind of jaded and just like...
Yeah, I mean, I think I had some anger feeling like I had been lied to for a lot of my life, and like almost needing, I think, like wanting something from it, like acknowledgement that I'm not just a bad person because I laughed. I like was thinking about it, and you know, can we not see that I'm trying my best to like understand it still? Mm-hmm. It's still at the front of my mind. I'm not like, I haven't just let go of. In fact, for me, the whole thing is an act of love to try and say we need to be taking care of each other.
So
and
you kind of went from like, I can see the good in Christianity. You eventually give that up because of all the faults. Then you go through nihilism for a couple of years where you're not even asking any questions, and then now you're from an act of love.
I was asking a lot of questions, but it was like, it was still like, it was all depressing, all the answers I was getting. And it all means nothing.
But then you progressed into like an active atheist, and I'm actually going to do good by trying to get people asking questions.
And I wouldn't even say that, like, I guess I identified as an atheist only, I used to say that I was 50 yards past agnostic.
Do you still identify as an atheist?
I don't know.
I would.
I don't necessarily attribute to any particular religious belief or anything, and I wouldn't say that I'm really that aligned with necessarily any of them, but kind of bits and pieces of everything. And I'm just on a journey to try and understand things. But I think, you know, I'm really looking at these days the common thread, which kind of connects all of them, which is about love. Really, seems to be the common thread in almost all religions. Yeah. And now I'm starting to actually find myself coming back to not the dogmas of these religions, but being able to have meaningful conversations with Christians as a way of being like, I think we might believe the same thing at our core principles. Yeah. And just because there's some like weird things about the Old Testament and this vengeful God,
like get to the root.
Let's go back to Jesus and what Jesus was talking about. Love God, which to me is be in awe of what's happening around you. That mystery, and like,
which you have access to in every given moment.
And everybody has access to that.
Yeah.
To just take it back to like, this is crazy. This is awesome. So that's loving God for me. It's just like not taking for granted this thing that's happening. Love the people around you. They're all on a common journey, trying to figure out what's going on. Everyone has suffering, giving compassion, realizing that people aren't trying to do things because they're just spiteful or only selfish. Like everyone is on this path of trying to figure out things, and giving compassion for people at varying stages of that path. But also love yourself, you know. And if you can't love yourself, then it's hard to care about anything else. It's finding joy. Yeah. And that sums up the Old Testament for me. And Jesus is still one of my heroes to this day. He was the guy flipping over tables and saying the religious authority is trying to make it to contain things, you know, and it's not that. It's about love. The whole thing's about love. And with that, the guy he's my hero. He's one of my heroes for sure. And when I start to bring Christianity into this thing of like, you don't need to defend the Old Testament. Let's just talk about like these principles. We're actually on the same page. I believe in love. I believe in these things of that we should love. And then we all of a sudden end up, they're like, yeah, that feeling when you just like take it all in and it like fills you've got all this energy inside of your, like that was my worship experience. You know, that one particular time when I was 15 where it like really kind of set into me. That was my experience, was I just took it all in. I took in the whole magnificentness of everything and how small my problem actually was. It was just a blip of time that I could get back into, like, this is crazy and magnificent, and there's love, you know, and I tapped into this thing of love and just feeling loved again and feeling love inside of myself and knowing that I was like a worthy person to be loved. Yeah. And that filled me up.
I've had a lot of, my experience has been similar of trying to figure things out with my mind. Yeah. And as I stepped more into like, again, I don't like subscribe to like, I am a Taoist, I am this, a Buddhist, I have that. Like, it's like, I've started to study all of them a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I 100% could not be more resonant with, it's just all founded on love and the exploration of what it is, love, and the experience of what it is. And stepping away or from having to understand it with concepts has been one of the most freeing things, because then I can just focus on the experience of the feeling of it and the expansionary feeling of it, and becoming it and being it.
Yeah.
And then that is, what I'm trying to say is stepping out of the concept of trying to understand all of that has been freeing.
Totally.
And I still get pulled in and stuck in it, and I still enjoy doing what we're doing, having conversations about
totally.
it. But there's a lot less attachment to it because everyone's just sharing their perspectives
and it's
with the words.
Yeah, exactly.
The words that they've
we
got.
fundamentally don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have things that seem to resonate with us, and that feels true in a lot of and different periods of time. I've like kind of dabbled in different kind of belief systems to see how that feels, and some of them it's like, oh, that feels nice, but there's still I really enjoy not knowing and believing that we don't know, and that's okay.
Do you have places you get stuck still today? Like what are some of the main, like, I'm sure you do.
Well, yeah, I mean, like emotions are always something that we like, how we've talked previous times about how emotions, sometimes we feel like we are our emotions, and being able to like
identifying with the emotions.
Yeah. And that like real connection to my experience is what the world is. The universe is this, and that person caused me pain. They made the pain in me.
They did it to me.
You know. So it's hard to approach those things with love and just being like, oh no, they were doing their best, and it's not. This isn't my drama, and it's okay. It's all going to be okay, and just like letting that kind of flow through. But it helps a lot to kind of get back to that place of just being like, compassion is almost more of a gift to ourselves than it is to others. It's like thought to be, really giving to other people is, for them, and it's like altruism and stuff. But I'm coming to learn that may be how we're taught to kind of get things to start. But eventually it's just for me, doing that makes me feel more whole inside. It's
right.
It gives everyone room to just be like, oh, that's happening because they're relationship with their father, or whatever.
You could go in to try and figure it all out.
Yeah. But it's just like accepting them for where they're at and still appreciating that they're someone to care about and to love, And then
witnessing the experience inside of you.
Yeah, totally.
So it's like these experiences
and it's
arise.
Freeing. It's freeing.
Yeah.
It's freeing not to have contempt. It's freeing not to be angry. When you live in that state of love and you just like accept the things that are around you, it's a lot easier to stay in that state of love.
Yeah.
I was actually talking to one of the things, I've been reconnecting with a lot of my family on Christianity, which was quite divisive for a long period of time. And
after leaving,
and they worry, a lot of worry, just like being afraid, like my son's going to go to hell. That was like a concern, I think. But I have been really trying to connect back into God as being this thing that one of my main things that I've witnessed lately that I'm really feeling is that there's a place where love comes from that I don't understand. And the more that I try and pour out love, the faster it comes into me.
Right.
It's not something that I need to like go and like fill up my gas with love again. If I stay in that place,
just let it go out, let it flow out, and then as you empty, there's room for more.
Yeah. Well, it's just like it's
fresh love to come in.
Yeah, it's like never ending. It's
abundant.
The faster I try and pour it out, the faster it's inside of me, the more I feel full. And that, I relate.
A fresh cup of love.
Who needs a fresh cup of love? Is your glass a little bit low?
My glass is full. Well, you got to go and empty that glass.
But, we try and retain that thing. And then that is actually a thing, I think, in our culture, is that we try and hold on to particular things, whether it's...
You try and
contain it as being, this is how I protect my love.
It's like how we do it with money.
Yeah, very much so.
Right? You got to get it and then
or
protect
relationships.
It.
Why we get really jealous, because we try and actually protect that thing that we experience that love, and we want to protect it. And we don't want things to threaten that love that we are experiencing. It's like I'm doing this thing, and it's like
that's
love,
my love.
And I need love. Love is important,
That's my partner.
Yeah,
my person.
And so when you start to it starts to become something where you become a lot less afraid when you just start pouring it out, and you're like, oh, this is infinite. I can just keep doing it, and it's never gonna go away.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at.
That true understanding of an experience of the infinite nature, though. That's one of my favorite things to contemplate. To realize the infinite nature of all of it.
Yeah.
It literally is made out of abundance. like reality is.
And it just reverberates in and around you. As soon as you start doing it like to everyone around you, it just is something that everybody wants to be part of. They experience it also, and they're just like, this is awesome. And that concept of like what Jesus was doing, he was just spreading that idea, and it was resonating. It was just like rapidly, crowds of people were gathering just to come and hear this guy just talk about, we need to love each other. And when somebody slaps you, let him hit the other cheek if that's what he needs. Let him do that.
Shit. That's good. Yeah.
Like that's, I always joke that it's not just turning the other cheek, it's like turning around and letting them slap your ass too, And if they really need to slap your ass, let them slap your ass as well. You got 4 cheeks, you just don't get angry when they hit you the first one. But anyway,
Jesus is really good, isn't he?
He's just like, yeah, it's like, it's good for me too.
So
joy.
Under the new, so Jesus is not, like, Jesus is the Son of God though, but he was just an incredible man then? Is that like, in the Bible, Jesus is the only Son of God in that way?
Yeah, contextually. Like,
how do you look at it now? Is Jesus just an insanely enlightened man that was just...
Well, what is the Son of God? I mean,
many people, for me, I think we're just all children of God.
I kind of think a similar thing.
He's just an enlightened being.
And he might have been one of the ones that was kind of bringing forth this like message for that group of people that ended up being like, this guy's like talking next level, Yeah. And that would be something. And even like,
Is that how you see it today though?
I don't know. Like there's a historical version of Jesus that I think, I don't even know if Jesus necessarily was a real person, I don't know. There's like some evidence that seems to suggest that he was. It's like been written about a lot. It was, but where does legend start? And that some of the miracles that he was doing did he actually walk on water? Like, I don't know about these things. Like these things are like, it doesn't matter actually to me. If it was something that like people started to be like, this guy he's saying the things that are important, and they needed to believe that he was something else to receive that message.
Because no man could say this things like this guy's
right.
saying.
And if that was the case, then that's okay. I mean,
right.
It got warped into something different and kind of got weaponized as a means for control and all of the different things. And that's terribly sad. But the early parts of Christianity they were rebels. They were all rebels. They were all being burned or being fed to lions. And
people that were in the Christian faith.
Yeah, they were
badass warriors.
They were really badass people, like badass people walking around being like, we need to love each other. And they're like, send them to the lions, like that's crazy to be like being so afraid to spread a message of love, really walking around trying to spread a message of love. And,
I mean, is that
putting you in a ring,
putting
you in a ring and getting eaten by lions. Like that was real things that happened. Those guys were badass, and that's inspiring to me now too, is to just feel like I can pursue that as being something that's important and valuable to scorn, to people being like hippy dippy or whatever the kind of some of these concepts end up being. Like talking about love can sometimes be something where it's a lot of people roll their eyes to that,
Yep. I've been there. I think I've rolled my eyes back in the early days, but then I've also been roll-eyed at.
Yeah, totally.
All he's ever talking about is love and purpose and all these things. But I also just enjoy talking about it, so it's like what I talk about.
Totally. I do, like, if we're sharing a message of, like, and it depends on what you want. Like, if you're in a place of feeling like you just need to be experiencing that thing, then that's...
I think you talk about the things you want to experience at some level. Like,
I do think a lot about, like, how to communicate ideas, though. Like, I feel like some of these things would be really helpful for our entire society, and for people's mental health, and to try and bring it into a context that they don't roll their eyes to, but they're like, yeah, I have felt that. When my dad died and that,
Maybe that's where we take the conversation now then. It's just like, what are useful ways to think about all this stuff that's actually beneficial for humanity right now? We're living in an age where it's seemingly there's a lot of mental health issues and anxiety increasing and suicide rates increasing. Like, what are simple, useful ways to think about why we're here and that people can given everything you've experienced in your life, what what are the simplicities? And you've mentioned a few of them, which is just love for one another, and like I really like the 3 that you've brought. Just like if you really simplify it all and want to connect with a lot of people, love yourself. Which these are not necessarily easy to do, but love yourself, love your neighbor, love God.
All those things are a journey,
Each one of them is a journey.
That's our spiritual journey.
And they're connected journeys.
That's our spiritual journeys. In almost every religion, that's like we're all kind of trying to walk through those journeys. There's like very little religions that are like, hate your neighbor, love yourself and your family, and, worship God or he's going to murder you. Like, It's not like it's always just like, it's not a fear-based of God, So fundamentally, we all want to just believe in the awe and that it's a being that is like really loving. He's always a loving God,
right?
And he just had some character flaws that we, and that begs the question: did he create us in his image, or did we create him in our image? And that's us kind of painting that picture of all of the bad characteristics, the jealous, revengeful, whatever God, we painted that into the way that he must have been. I'd be mad if people were worshiping a different God, so he probably would fireball them. Don't do that, And so we create these like stories to try and contain what, But so these days, how do we spread that message of love, and what are ways to communicate it?
Yeah,
I think for me, being earnest and attentive to people when you actually care and you ask questions and try and find out what people care about and what's important to them, and then just be with them in that place. Ask them how they're actually feeling. Get into the core. A lot of times I always think of like how, hey, how are you doing today? Oh yeah, I'm doing good. But like that's just saying hello. That's not actually. There's no engagement in like how are you doing today. It's a way and that's fine. I'm not saying that we need to engage with everyone but that idea is kind of ingrained in us where a lot of times we won't talk about things that we're actually feeling. And that's a journey that we are actually...
And I think that's what this is. I want to talk about what's really going on, what people actually feel. Yeah, it's been really cool hearing all your your story in summary, but yeah, what it was actually like for you asking hard questions. One thing that I've observed just in my last few years is just like, and in our community, so much of it is just right now getting in touch with feelings in a general sense. And most of my life, from like a mind kind of point of view, I've identified as a happy person, like as an identity.
Right.
When what I understand now is like, these are states. You experience the state of I'm in a state of happiness, or I can have. But once I let go of the identification of I am a happy person, like Brad is happy, which is an idea, I actually gained a lot more freedom to experience my emotions, and I didn't realize how much. You'd
be obligated, right? You'd be obligated to be a happy person because that is
right. So I'm always trying to match the thought.
Yeah.
I'm always trying to match the belief.
And so what happens when you become sad, when you feel sadness? There's a split in your brain as
or I'd block it.
Exactly.
Or I would actually just block.
Because it's not actually working for its...
Yeah. So I'd suppress it or block it or whatever, but I know that today I experience sadness a lot. Like a lot more than I ever did growing up. And I don't think it's a bad thing by any means, but I used to not be able to experience it because of the belief that I'm a happy person.
Right.
And it could, I haven't experienced this, but like I would say probably the other way too. If you identify in your mind as a depressed person or an unhappy person, then maybe an experience of joy would come along, and the suitable state would be happiness, and you might block it the other way. But with me moving away from identification as a core practice in my life, I'm learning how to be in touch with my emotions and experience them more fully. And I think that's a period that we're kind of going through as a planet right now. Or I know in our community, it's like people are just like actually honest with what they feel. Today, we have a group messenger, and it's like people will just be like, this is what I'm feeling today. This is what's going on in my life. And then people will be like, thank you for sharing. And that's it.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily to solve anything. I don't know if that's it's just like, this is what I'm experiencing.
And it's to be heard and acknowledged, and to acknowledge it yourself. I think a big part of
acknowledging it yourself. Yeah,
a big part of like a lot of mental health actually feels to me like it's that schism of like trying to be something that you're not feeling, trying to like go into a state where you're like
feeling.
Yeah, instead of like just acknowledging it. Like it's weather. You know, I emotions for me are like weather. They change.
It's
they
raining.
Just change. Yeah. It would be absurd for us to think like, but I need it to be sunny today. And if you like, if you were so set on it, like,
if your wedding's tomorrow.
Well, but as soon as you start being like, it's supposed to be sunny, it's like, I need it to be sunny. Right. That's suffering because you don't actually
reality.
Yeah. You don't have control over that.
Right.
And it's just a pattern that's changing, and you have to.
Well, do we have control over our emotions? I don't even like.
I think, well, that's a.
It's a tough one because at some level I have controlled it so that I blocked stuff.
Yes.
But then I'm not.
You're suppressing it. You're still experiencing that emotion. It's still there. It's
getting stored somewhere.
Yeah. And so you can't just get rid of them altogether. I don't think anyway. I mean, you can choose what you do with the emotions. I think that's a totally different thing. And I think that's actually a big part of that practice is acknowledging the emotions and not, if you're feeling upset about something, well, why do you feel upset about it? Like feeling it and being like, I'm just really angry. And to just be able to place what it is. Like, why does that make you feel angry? And you can actually kind of work through it. You can
inquire further after, yeah.
Yeah, and it helps to understand in other people where they might be at and how to interact even with people, because it starts to create compassion for yourself too, to be like, I am feeling angry and it's just like my response to this. It's not even rational, but that's okay. Yeah. I'm allowed to feel angry, but I don't need to go and pick a fight or go in something because I'm angry. I can just experience it like, that hurt my feelings or whatever. Yeah.
I'm going to actually pivot us back a step. Because we're going off into like the emotional journey and stuff, but I kind of want to actually pivot. Now that I'm feeling into it, I want to pivot back into just the baseline inquiry of like spirituality and the spiritual path in general. What do you kind of feel what is a useful way to think about the spiritual path? Would you say today, if you were talking to somebody and they're like kind of just, I don't know, maybe even new, like some people don't identify as spiritual. Like in my world, when I see anything, I'm like, it's all spiritual. It's all that.
Right.
But some people don't identify with that. They're like, oh, I'm not spiritual or whatever. But what is a useful way what is the spiritual path, if I was to ask you?
Well, it's really for everyone has a very different one. But I think it's actually being at a place where trying to be compassionate as to like where they are and where they may have come from, like to start talking about like a metaphysical realm that's something or whatever that you might believe can be something that creates that kind of, oh, that person's crazy sort of thing, instead of helping them to be like, oh, I'm experiencing that thing too, where like trying to relate into our human experience, I think maybe is part of the thing, for me anyway, where you're with them on a level that creates a common experience and how we're not different. And that's actually a really big part of my own spirituality.
So it's trying to find
is that we're actually part of the
commonality.
same thing. Yeah. We're part of this absurdity, this universe experiencing itself, which could, what is it? That single entity that you and I are skin cells metaphorically on this thing. And we're side by side being like, yeah, we're both skin cells. We're doing what we're doing as humans.
Right.
But to try and show that commonality is something that we...
So looking for the commonality.
How we're bridged together, as opposed to
differentiate. The egoic path is in many ways trying to figure... Right. You're putting all your attention on what makes you different.
Right.
Whereas, and I really resonate with that. It's like so much of the spiritual path is like, I'm going to move away from looking about what makes me different than you, or better than you, or more than you, or whatever. And now I want to switch my attention to what makes us brothers. What makes us the same. What makes us together. And makes us one.
Whether you're looking at, like, because spirituality is really difficult to define. And I try and use all the tools that we've come to to see whether it's like the study of different spiritualities or science and what we know about mindfulness or any of the
right. And you found the bridge at the top is just love.
Yeah, well, exactly. And we're all trying to understand why that feels so good. Now, when we when we're in that place, we like, if you look at
so good.
Modern science is saying gratitude journaling is something that ends up helping people with anxiety. And we have
modern science is saying
this.
Just have a gratitude journal.
Yeah, and it's just a matter. It's and meditation and mindfulness, coming back to the present moment. So much treatment for depression is starting to really come back to. Have you tried being mindful? Like mindfulness?
Have you tried being?
Do you do mindfulness meditation? Mindfulness meditation is a psychological tool now. Science has come back to understanding that it is helping. So
don't get carried away with your future thoughts and all that stuff.
Yeah, just of relieving anxiety and depression and coming back to a place of just like breath, being in this place. And it just, all of your feathers just kind of like can become calmer and you're not ruffled up. It helps, So being able to bring it back to a language of, if you've got someone that's very skeptical of like what's unseen, to talk about it in that way. And I feel it in that way. I really connect in with using science as a means to try and explain things. And there's no difference to me between the spiritual world or like my spiritual experience and science. And they're all kind of like,
again,
just
oneness.
Exactly. There's still something that
together. Yeah.
So yeah, just getting to where people are and what resonates with them, and letting them know that it's okay to believe those things, and you're not crazy for thinking that your grandma has a spirit that you sometimes tap into. That's great. Feel that,
Yeah.
Because in some ways, that for many different people, that's true for a lot of different reasons why that might be, whether it's a ghost or a spirit, or whether it's just a new energy that's been released, or whether it's science saying that it's just this experience that you've had with them that was sets in thoughts that kind of help you through difficult times because you have that memory that person loved you. There's a lot of reasons why that might help, but do that then. And you're not crazy for believing that it's helping you and that it means something and life has meaning to you.
Yeah. Thank you. What are some of your core contemplations or practices today?
What do you mean?
I don't know. The things that you put attention on is another way of saying this. Right now, today, what do you put attention on that's good for you? Or practices?
I've been a very emotional person for most of my life, and in the process of leaving Christianity, and I actually felt like a lot of those things were used to manipulate me.
Yeah.
And so I became like very detached from my emotions. And so for me, really being attentive to what I'm experiencing and being able to let things go back to a place of just feeling gratitude for getting to experience any of those emotions, and really continuing to come. I try and keep bringing everything back to absurdism. It's really one of the things that really helps me to stay aligned on not becoming too attached to my emotions or anything like that.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Thank you for all of that. We shared a lot. You just talked about a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it was great. It's nice to actually put it into a cohesive idea instead of just being like feeling this was my past. I don't know, to be able to share it as a journey. It's a journey. It's a journey.
Hopefully this came out somewhat cohesive within the absurdity of us not really getting anywhere. Yeah, thank you for coming on and sharing.
Thanks for having me, man. It's been good. Always a pleasure chatting with you.
I'll have to bring you back in a couple of years and we'll see how absurd it's gotten in that mind of yours.
Yeah. It'll be great.
Cool.
You'll be like, hell Satan.
Come here.
Thanks, dude.
That's good. Yeah. Sweet.